She smiled when she said it. That's what stuck with me. Not the words, those came after. Not the name she dropped like it was a celebrity cameo in a trashy soap opera. No, it was the way she smiled. Like she was confessing to a high school crush instead of detonating 20 years of marriage over lasagna and cheap Cabernet. "I'm in love with Michael," she said, folding her napkin like she was tidying up a goddamn picnic. "My cousin. We grew up together. It's true love. Michael, her cousin. The one with the missing tooth and the permanent neck tan from riding ATVs through trailer parks in Missouri. The guy who once tried to sell us CBD dog treats at Thanksgiving." I didn't flinch, just stared at her. Not because I didn't care, because I was afraid I might do something military. I hadn't touched that side of myself in decades, not since Bosnia. But it's always there, coiled in the spine like an old injury. "Your cousin Michael?" I asked like I hadn't heard it the first time. She nodded, still smiling. "It's not wrong, you know. We're not that close by blood. Technically second cousins. And besides, love is love." That last part almost made me laugh. Almost. But my jaw locked, and I felt my molars grind. Not from rage. From restraint. Because I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in years. Freedom. She wasn't sorry. Not remotely. She was relieved. I glanced down at the table. Half-eaten meatloaf. Her favorite. I'd made it because it was Wednesday and we always had meatloaf on Wednesdays. I peeled the potatoes by hand. Even seasoned the damn green beans. Meanwhile, she was mentally packing a bag for Michael's place, where I imagine he keeps his forks in a shoebox and his mattress on the floor. "You don't seem angry," she said, tilting her head like a therapist in a Netflix drama. "I thought you'd explode." I looked at her. Really looked. Her hair still damp from the shower. She'd worn perfume. The good one I gave her on our 15th anniversary. Chanel. Not for me, clearly. For him. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm processing." It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the full truth either. I wasn't just processing the affair. I was processing the timeline. The missing weekends. The yoga retreats. The sudden interest in ancestry and family reunions. I was also thinking about the bronze urn in my study. The one with the eagle insignia and the hidden compartment. Inside was a flash drive labeled contingency plan. I hadn't looked at it in years. But tonight, it glowed in my memory like a flare in a dark jungle. "John, you've changed," she said softly, like she was the victim here. "You're distant. Always working. You don't smile like you used to. This didn't just happen out of nowhere." There it was. The gaslight special. I nodded. "Sure. My fault. I forgot to book a couple's massage with your cousin." She winced. Just a flicker. Then it was gone. "You don't understand what we have," she said. "It's deep, spiritual. It's fate." I stood up. Not suddenly. Slowly. Deliberately. I took my plate to the sink. Washed it. Dried it. Placed it back in the cabinet. She just sat there, watching me like I was supposed to scream or throw something. But I've been trained to do something far more terrifying. Be calm. Be patient. Be silent. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight," I said as I walked past her. She opened her mouth. Maybe to argue. Maybe to gloat. I'll never know. I didn't give her the chance. Just kept walking. I shut the door behind me, sat on the edge of the twin bed, and stared at the floral wallpaper Linda insisted we keep because it felt cozy. I opened my phone and found the encrypted app one hadn't used since the Obama administration. Tomorrow I'd open the folder. Tomorrow the real work would begin. I thought maybe, just maybe, my daughter would have enough of me in her to see this for what it was. Emily pulled into the driveway 2 days later in her cherry red Honda, the one I paid off as a graduation gift. She walked in like she owned the place, hugged Linda first, tight, long, like they were part of some secret sisterhood now. Then she glanced at me, gave me one of those quick, obligatory hugs, the kind you give your dentist when you run into him at the grocery store. "Hey, Dad." I nodded. "Hey." We sat at the kitchen table again. Same damn table where Linda detonated our life 48 hours earlier. Now we were back for the aftershock. Emily looked excited. Not anxious. Not uncomfortable. Excited. She had this glimmer in her eyes I used to see on Christmas morning. back when she was 7 and believed in magic. Now it was back, only this time the magic was her mom banging a cousin. So, she began, folding her hands like she was hosting a podcast. I wanted to say how proud I am of both of you. I blinked. Proud? Yeah, she said, smiling at her mother, who gave her a knowing little nod like they were co-conspirators in a rom-com. It takes courage to follow your heart, even when people don't get it. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. I'd expected confusion, maybe a little anger. This was her mother, and her mother's cousin. Instead, I was watching my only child treat this like a Hallmark plot twist. Emily, I said slowly, you do know Michael's her cousin, right? Like, related. She rolled her eyes. Dad, it's not like that. He's her second cousin. It's legal in, every state that matters. I stared at her. That's your argument? It's not about bloodlines, she said, and I swear to God, I felt something in my skull shift. It's about energy. They have this connection. They finish each other's sentences. You can feel it. Yeah, I could feel it, all right, like food poisoning crawling through my gut. Linda didn't say much, just sipped her tea and watched me, waiting to see if I'd snap. I didn't. I stayed still, colder than I've ever been, and I've been frozen in a sleeping bag outside Kandahar in January. Emily reached across the table and patted my hand. I know this is hard for you, but you have to understand, this is love. Real love. Not whatever you two were faking all these years. My heart didn't break. Calcified. That's when I realized I wasn't just losing my wife. I'd already lost my daughter. Not to death or drugs or distance, but to something worse, willing delusion. She wanted to believe this was love because it made things easier, simpler, cleaner than accepting that her mother was a manipulative coward and her dad had been quietly carrying the weight of this house for 2 decades. I excused myself, walked out to the garage, and stood by the workbench. There, covered in a thin layer of sawdust, was the oak jewelry box I'd made for Emily when she turned 16. I opened it. Inside, tucked under the velvet lining, was the key to a small safety deposit box I'd kept secret from everyone. I held it in my hand for a long moment. Funny how betrayal clarifies things, makes decisions cleaner, sharper. They wanted a love story? Fine, they get one. But every fairy tale has a villain, and sometimes he builds the castle himself just to burn it down. At 5:42 a.m., I opened the closet and stared at a row of dress shirts I hadn't touched in months. The house was still. Linda was asleep in her bedroom and Emily was passed out in the guest room, blissfully ignorant to the wreckage they'd both helped manufacture. I didn't slam doors. I didn't break anything. I didn't leave a note. I just folded 5 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, socks, underwear, and packed them into a black Samsonite I hadn't used since my last trade show in Dallas. I left the good watch on the nightstand. That was the one she always complimented. Let her keep it. Let her look at it and remember the man who didn't scream when she gutted him. I went to the study, the room she always called John's cave. She hated it, said it smelled like old books and gun oil. That was the point. It was the only place in the house untouched by Pottery Barn. I slid open the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a slim brown folder. No title on the outside, just a faint imprint where a label used to be. I'd ripped it off years ago. Inside, in crisp alphabetical tabs, were names, dates, notarized pages, and 3 keys. 1 physical, 2 digital. It was labeled Contingency Plan. Not Plan B. Not just in case. Contingency. Because I'd seen what betrayal looks like before. Not just in war zones. In boardrooms. In barracks. And yes, even at backyard barbecues with smiling neighbors. Linda always mocked me for being paranoid. Said I was cold, overcautious, emotionally distant. Maybe, but emotionally distant men don't wake up bankrupt. Inside the folder were irrevocable trust documents, drawn up after Linda's 3rd girls' weekend in Tahoe 5 years ago, when I spotted her browser history and found a reservation at a hotel we'd never stayed at. She swore it was an accident, blamed it on a surprise from her friend Jackie. I smiled, played dumb, and drove straight to my lawyer on Monday. Now those trusts, filed, notarized, and waiting, would do exactly what I built them to do. The moment she filed for divorce, a clause would trigger. One that quietly shifted the full financial weight of my company properties, investments, and pension into a shell she couldn't touch. I built the system like I used to build combat readiness plans, quiet, thorough, and cold. There was also a letter inside. Not addressed to Linda, not even to Emily. It was to my attorney, Ruth Carter. Sharp as hell, mid-50s, ran a boutique practice out of Savannah. Used to be married to a con artist. She'd know what to do. I locked the folder in a fireproof case and set it next to my suitcase. Then I stood in the center of the study and looked around one last time. Framed medals. Commendations. The photo of me and Emily on her first fishing trip. Her smile gap-toothed and smeared with peanut butter. All of it meant something once. Now it was just evidence. I walked down the hallway, past the closed doors. Didn't peek inside. Didn't pause. Just left. The morning air hit like a slap. Cold, sharp, real. I placed the suitcase in the trunk. The folder rode shotgun. I didn't drive to a motel or a friend's house. I drove to a location that no one in my family even knew existed. A 2-bedroom condo I'd quietly purchased under a trust name 4 years ago. I'd furnished it in secret down to the toothbrush. As I turned the key, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger. Not grief. Control. Let Linda play house with her cousin. Let Emily plan Instagram captions for their incest-themed wedding. I was done reacting. Now I was writing the script. The pen moved like it had muscle memory. Line by line, signature by signature, I carved my name into documents I had written for a version of me that still believed in Linda. Not the woman sipping Chardonnay with her cousin now lover. No, this was back when I thought the marriage might still be real, salvageable, worth protecting. So I did what I was trained to do. I prepared for the ambush I couldn't yet see. Started 6 years ago. Linda had started getting distant. Not cold, she was never cold. Linda weaponized warmth. Late-night laughter in the kitchen on her phone. Names that didn't ring familiar. I remember her taking longer showers, coming out in towels with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't confront her. I observed. I recorded. And then, in the quiet hours of the morning, I rewrote our entire future. My business, a logistics firm I built from nothing after retiring from the Army, was restructured under a holding company in Wyoming. No kids, no partners, no liabilities. The military pension moved to a restricted trust that reactivates under spousal abandonment clauses. Our home, owned, technically by a limited liability company, on paper, nothing that screamed John Davis. The offshore account, a little bonus Linda never knew about, set up back when I was contracting in the Gulf. None of this was illegal, just strategic, like digging trenches before the shells fall. I'd run every scenario with Ruth. She'd even joked once, "You sure you're not still active duty? This is surgical." At the time, I'd laughed, said I was just being cautious. Truth was, I already knew. Not the details, not the names, but I knew. Linda had detached and she wasn't coming back. She stayed for convenience, for image, for Emily. But love? That left the building around the same time she reconnected with her cousin on Facebook. I'd kept the documents sealed, buried, untouched, because a part of me still wanted to believe that maybe the alarms were false. That maybe, just maybe, she'd come to her senses. Then she dropped the Michael bomb over dinner and smiled like it was a toast. Now, I sat in Ruth's office, papers in front of me, coffee going cold. She wore her signature black turtleneck. No makeup, just fire behind her eyes. She didn't ask if I was sure. She knew better. "You ready?" she asked. I didn't answer. I picked up the pen, flipped through the pile of counterpetitions, trust activation memos, asset transition triggers, and signed. Click, click, click. My signature flowed like a man cashing out at a blackjack table he'd already cleared. There was no drama, no fireworks, just clean, precise execution. Ruth leaned back when it was done. "She's not going to see this coming. I know. She thinks she's walking away with half your kingdom. She's walking into a cardboard castle," I said, standing. "She just doesn't know it yet." I glanced at the window. Sunlight through the blinds cut across the floor like prison bars. I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. But not in the way the movies show. No dramatic music. No fists in the air. Just silence. Control. The quiet knowledge that everything was already in motion. A chess game played 3 years ago was about to reach checkmate. Let her file first. Let her think she'd won. Let her believe she could walk in wearing white and walk out with my empire. Because by the time she realized what I'd done, it would already be hers. Every lie, every betrayal, all of it signed, sealed, and waiting. Linda served me the papers in our driveway, like she was handing over a damn potluck casserole. She pulled up in her new CRV, leased under her name, but paid with my company card back when she still pretended to do bookkeeping for the business. I was pruning hedges, gloves on, sweat across my forehead. She pulls in like the queen of suburbia, steps out wearing sunglasses and a smirk so rehearsed I swear I could hear the stage cue behind it. In her hand, a thick envelope, cream-colored, heavy stock, of course. Let's keep this civil, she said, stepping just close enough for the neighbors to hear. Sign and we'll all move on. I looked at her. No makeup, but lips glossed. Hair tied back. She was glowing, not with happiness, but with the kind of smug satisfaction people wear when they think they've cornered you and still expect a thank you for the effort. Civil, I repeated. Sure. She held the envelope out. My attorney says it's fair. I didn't even ask for the vacation home in Hilton Head. We can split the main house, half the pension, and I get the Lexus. Alimony, of course. Standard terms. Of course. You'll get visitation. Emily's grown, but holidays are important. I blinked. She really thought this was a negotiation. That this was me crawling away from the wreckage while she skipped off with the spoils and her cousin in tow. I took the envelope, didn't open it, just held it like a grenade I already knew was a dud. I'll sign everything, I said calmly. She tilted her head. You will. You want to move on. Who am I to stand in the way of true love? The words hung there. She didn't flinch. Exactly, she said. We don't have to fight. We're adults. Sure, adults. Adults who commit adultery with blood relatives and then pat themselves on the back for their moral maturity. She turned on her heel, strutted back to the car, and drove off like she just handed me a pizza. Not divorce papers that could have gutted a lesser man. Inside the envelope, 42 pages of legal demands, bullet points, spousal support projections, asset splits, custody suggestions for a daughter who was already too far gone to notice which parent was bleeding. What made me laugh, quietly later bourbon in hand, was that her lawyer's name was scribbled in blue ink at the bottom of the first page. Richard Langford. Dick. Perfect. Richard clearly hadn't done his homework. Or maybe he had, and Linda had just brushed it off. That's the thing about people like her. They confuse charm with leverage. She thought the version of me that used to rub her feet after long workdays was still the same guy signing these papers. What she didn't realize was, that man died the night she smiled and told me about Michael. Now she was negotiating with a man who'd already signed his heart away, who kept nothing but receipts. I didn't call Ruth that night. I didn't need to. She'd been expecting this. Instead, I pulled out a red marker and started circling numbers on the documents, like a teacher grading a very stupid test. Alimony? Cute. House split? Try again. Business assets? Not yours. Not legally. Not ethically. Not in any multiverse where logic applied. But sure, Linda, let's keep it civil. Let's move on. You filed first because you thought that meant control. I'm going to sign these papers with the same hand that wrote your ending. And you're going to thank me for it right before the floor gives out. Ruth Carter didn't believe in handshakes. She believed in war. Her office smelled like steel and eucalyptus. Minimalist furniture. No personal photos. Just degrees, awards, and a glass-encased letter from her ex-husband's second wife that read, "Thank you for destroying him so completely. I didn't have to." She greeted me with a nod and a tight smile that barely moved her face. Sharp suit. No-nonsense ponytail. No perfume. No warmth. She'd been a JAG officer once, before she left the military to specialize in high-asset divorces. If I had to build a legal weapon from scratch, I'd start with Ruth and give her fangs. She glanced at Linda's paperwork once and actually chuckled. Not laughed. Chuckled. Low and dry like a mechanic discovering your check engine light was hiding a cracked frame. She thinks she's won, Ruth said, flipping a page. Jesus, she really thinks this is a power play. I said nothing, Just watched her annotate page 12 with a red pen like she was grading an idiot's dissertation. She wants the house? Technically, it's in an LLC. She doesn't know. Ruth nodded. She won't get it. Pension? Shielded. Triggered by filing. She whistled. I like you already. Then she leaned back and cracked her knuckles. One by one, staring out the window like a general planning an ambush. John, she said slowly, you're sitting on a tactical nuke, and she just handed you the launch codes. I handed her the folder, the real one. The one with the timelines, trust documentation, dated transfers, and quietly collected records of Linda's financial behavior over the last 6 years. Some of it petty. Spa treatments written off as business consultations. Some of it dirtier. Shared credit cards used to book hotels with Michael, meals for two in towns where no one was supposed to know their names. Ruth didn't flinch. She's seen worse. I want her to think she's getting everything, I said, until she's already gotten nothing. Ruth smiled then, not kindly, like a snake warming in the sun. We'll file a response that looks like surrender, she said. Give her the Lexus. Give her the TV. Hell, give her the rug if she wants it. But by the time the court date hits, the only thing she'll legally own is the lie she told herself. She started drafting. Her hands moved fast, typing without hesitation. Every clause was a trap. Every paragraph a polite middle finger in legalese. We'll make it sound cooperative, accommodating, passive, Ruth murmured as she worked. Let her think you're rolling over. She'll buy it, I said. She always underestimated silence. She won't read the fine print, Ruth added. People like Linda? They skim. They assume. And that's what made this so perfect. Linda didn't want a war. She wanted a coronation. She wanted me to kneel so she could walk off feeling like the noble victim who had to break free to find her true love. Let her have her story. Let her walk into court in white like it's a wedding. Let her drag Emily in with Instagram-ready smiles. Because while she's busy performing for the judge and waiting for the kingdom to drop into her lap, we'll already have buried the crown 6 feet under. Ruth closed the laptop. I'll have the revised agreement couriered to her lawyer by Thursday, she said, already reaching for her phone. They'll read it as a complete surrender. And when will they realize it's not? Her smile widened just slightly, midway through court. And just like that, the Real divorce began. I was sipping coffee in the condo's kitchen. Black, no sugar, in a chipped mug that had the words "World's Okayest Dad" etched across the side. A gag gift from Emily back when she still thought I hung the moon. I kept it even after everything. Maybe out of habit. Maybe as a reminder that I used to matter to her. The phone buzzed. It was one of those pointless notifications. Emily tagged you in a photo. I hadn't heard from her in days. No calls. No texts. Not since she'd played defense attorney for her mother's spiritual connection with a second cousin. I opened the app. There they were. 3 people in the golden hour glow of a backyard patio. Linda, smiling like she'd never so much as burned toast. Michael, one arm wrapped tightly around her waist, the other holding a wine glass with pinky extended like a damn parody. And Emily, my daughter, grinning between them, holding up a peace sign like she was 13 again and hadn't just chosen a side. The caption? Dinner with Mom and Michael. Family forever, Redheart. Family forever. I stared at it for a long time. I zoomed in, like maybe I'd find some small detail that would redeem it. A sad glint in Emily's eye, a hand clenched too tightly, something to prove this wasn't what it looked like. But no, they looked happy, relaxed, complete. Without me, there wasn't any anger. Not this time. Just a dull, cold weight settling in my gut. Like cement hardening. I didn't comment, didn't message her. I just closed the app and placed the phone face down on the table. The coffee had gone cold. I stood up, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out the old shoebox I'd tucked behind the blankets. Inside, buried beneath some Polaroids and an expired passport, was a thumb drive. Red tape wrapped around it with a single word written in block letters. Failsafe. It held backups of every financial document, every trust agreement, every time-stamped copy of Linda's sketchy expenses, even a private investigator's photos I'd paid for and then buried, hoping I'd never need them. The pictures were blurry. The faces weren't. I stared at the drive. My thumb brushed the edge. There was no going back. Not now. This wasn't just a betrayal between spouses. This was a purge. A complete overwrite of the family I thought I was protecting. Emily wasn't confused. She wasn't caught in the middle. She was smiling. Proud. Proud to stand next to a man who used to call me Captain Buzzkill behind my back when he'd show up drunk to family reunions. The same man who once told a story about being almost valedictorian before blowing out his knee in a softball game. Michael. The dollar store version of me. Linda traded up in her mind. Younger. Easier. Dumber. And she convinced our daughter it was destiny. That I was the dead weight dragging everyone down with structure and restraint. That night I didn't sleep. But not because of grief. I started printing things. Bank records. IP logs. Screenshots. Everything Ruth might need to finish writing the final chapter. Every asset movement. Every date. I organized it into folders. Legal, financial, psychological. Yes, psychological. Ruth always said judges respond to patterns, not explosions. You want a judge to rule in your favor? Don't show them chaos. Show them a system. By 3 a.m., I had a binder the weight of a newborn. Emily wanted family forever. She'd get it. She just wouldn't like the inheritance. Court was scheduled for 9:30 a.m., but Linda showed up at 9:02, wearing white. Not cream, not beige, white. Like it was a damn wedding and she was the bride of second-chance morality. She walked in like she was floating, chin high, arms bare, not a single wrinkle on that dress. It was tailored, tight at the waist, wide at the hem. Almost bridal, almost mocking. The kind of thing a woman wears when she believes the world is finally giving her what it owes her. Her hand gripped Emily's like they were entering prom night together, mother and daughter, bound in betrayal and ignorance. Michael trailed behind them, 2 steps back, like a sidekick trying not to trip over his own loafers. He wore a blazer that didn't fit and sunglasses indoors. Smiling like a man who didn't have a single legal document to his name but thought he'd just inherited an empire. They took their seats on the left side. I was already there, 2nd row on the right, alone, black suit, no tie, the same watch I wore to my father's funeral. A single stack of folders beside me, 3, to be exact, each labeled in subtle gold. Assets, timeline, and disclosure. Neat, clean, silent. Ruth sat next to me, scanning her tablet, not speaking. We didn't need to rehearse anything. Everything had already been choreographed. This wasn't opening night, it was the final act. I looked across the room. Linda met my eyes. She smiled. Not cruelly, not apologetically, just confidently, like she believed this moment was her prize. The court, the judge, the performance. She had rehearsed it all in her mind and cast herself as the dignified woman who finally chose happiness after enduring years with the emotionally unavailable husband. Then she leaned toward Emily and whispered something. Emily giggled. Linda tucked a piece of hair behind her ear like she was posing for a photo that wasn't being taken. For a moment, I wondered if she realized how much she looked like a parody of herself, an actress who believed her own press release. The bailiff called for order. Everyone stood. Judge Hammonds entered. Elderly, deliberate, famously unsympathetic to drama. He adjusted his glasses and gave the room a quick scan before sitting down and opening his file. "This is Davis versus Davis," he said. "Final hearing. All parties present." Linda's lawyer, Dick Langford, rose. "Representing petitioner Linda Davis, Your Honor." Ruth stood next to me. "Respondent is present and represented." The judge nodded. "Let's begin." Langford went first, outlining Linda's request. Division of assets, spousal support, vehicle retention, and acknowledgement of amicable separation. He said amicable like he practiced it in the mirror. Linda beamed through the whole thing, like a valedictorian waiting to be handed the mic. When it was Ruth's turn, she barely spoke. No theatrics, just handed over the folders, assets, timeline, disclosure. "This is all we're submitting today, Your Honor," she said, her tone neutral. Surgical. The judge blinked. "You're not disputing the settlement?" "No, Your Honor," Ruth said. "We're confirming it. Everything is already in motion." Linda's eyes narrowed slightly. She glanced toward me, confused. I didn't move. Langford shifted. "Wait, so you're not contesting?" Ruth smiled politely. We're simply letting the documents speak. The judge opened the first folder. And Linda, still glowing in her wedding white dress, had no idea that every petal in her bouquet had already been shredded, because what she thought was surrender was just the wrapping paper. And inside it, the trap was already snapping shut. Langford cleared his throat, tapped his pen against the edge of the table like he was about to unveil the next great American compromise. Your Honor, we've outlined the settlement terms. My client retains the Lexus, the primary residence, and is requesting spousal support consistent with the standard 20-year marriage guideline. She has also agreed to forego any claim to Mr. Davis's business. Generously, I might add, so long as alimony is maintained. I glanced over at Ruth. She gave a half-nod, didn't blink. That was the cue. The judge looked at me. Mr. Davis, have you reviewed these terms? I stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. I've reviewed everything. Do you have any objections? I turned to Linda. She was glowing, hands clasped in her lap, head tilted ever so slightly, like she was posing for a portrait. She looked relieved, victorious, already halfway into her next chapter. No objections, I said. Langford nearly choked on his own teeth. He flipped a page as if expecting a trick. Linda leaned forward slightly, the smirk practically vibrating off her face. Thanks for being reasonable, she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. I nodded, just once, silent. The judge nodded back. Very well. If both parties are in agreement, we'll proceed to signature. Ruth slid the final page in front of me. The acknowledgement of settlement. A single signature required. My name, dated, witnessed by the court. I picked up the pen. Black ink. Ballpoint. Click. And I signed. There were no grand speeches. No objections. No fireworks. Just the sound of ink on paper and the quiet unraveling of Linda's future. Because what I'd signed wasn't just her fantasy agreement. It was her trap. Printed on legal stationery. Disguised as everything she'd asked for. The primary residence? Held by the LLC I controlled, activated under her filing. She didn't own it. She leased it, and the lease expired in 90 days. The Lexus? Already re-registered under her name 2 weeks ago. Full title. Along with full liability. The car had outstanding taxes. For unpaid tickets. A mechanical issue flagged in the inspection I'd conveniently left for her to discover later. The alimony? Structured monthly under a strict clause tied to her marital status and cohabitation. One confirmed report of her living with Michael, which I'd arranged through a private investigator and timestamped video, would trigger an immediate freeze. And the business? She waived all claim. Good. Because she never had one. Everything was layered, trusts, shells, documents dated and sealed long before this farce began. And because she was so focused on winning, she never questioned the silence. Never thought to ask why a man who had built everything from scratch was so willing to hand it all over with a smile. Because in her world, men either begged or exploded. I did neither. I signed. I handed the papers back. The judge nodded. Settlement accepted and binding. This court is adjourned. The gavel didn't thunder. Clicked. Linda stood first. She turned to me like we were ex-classmates who could now be friends again. You surprised me, she said quietly. I thought you'd fight. I finally met her eyes. Why would I fight over something I already burned down? She frowned, confused. But it was too late. The ashes were already cooling. Judge Hammonds adjusted his glasses and flipped through the papers with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The courtroom had already begun to empty. Bailiff shifting his weight near the door, Langford zipping his briefcase. Linda swiping through her phone like this was a brunch check-in instead of a legal proceeding. Then the judge stopped. His brow creased. He flipped a page backward, then forward again. He looked up. Mrs. Davis? Linda straightened, still radiating smug grace in that white dress. Yes, Your Honor? You've reviewed the settlement in full? She nodded quickly. Of course. My attorney handled everything. It's all fair. I've agreed. The judge tapped the page. You're aware that your total awarded assets are valued at $48,000? Linda blinked. Excuse me? $48,000, he repeated, now looking directly at her. No claims to the business. No ownership of the property. No access to the military pension or trust funds. No alimony due to undisclosed cohabitation. Just the Lexus, registered in your name, and $48,000 from a joint checking account. Langford froze mid-zip. What? Linda said again, the smile gone now, voice cracking just a little. Judge Hammonds turned the page toward her, spinning the file around so she could read it herself. You initialed this page, Mrs. Davis, and signed at the bottom. This is the finalized copy. It's been filed. I thought. She turned to Langford. That's not what you showed me. Langford opened his mouth, then closed it, flipping madly through his own copy, eyes darting line to line like a man realizing he brought a water pistol to a gunfight. Ruth leaned over and whispered, "Watch her closely." I did. The first stage was confusion. Linda stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Her lips moved as she read silently, trying to undo the meaning with sheer denial. The second stage was recognition. Her eyes locked on the clause. Activation of irrevocable trust upon filing by petitioner. Then the schedule of asset transfers. Then the timeline of financial restructuring. Then the signatures. Hers. Initials, dates, notary stamps. Wait, no, this isn't right. She shot up, papers trembling in her hands. I didn't agree to this. I thought, Richard, you told me. Langford was pale now. Linda, these were the documents you approved. I forwarded everything you signed. You didn't explain this. He gets everything? Everything. The judge raised a hand. Mrs. Davis, please sit down. No, I want to amend. This isn't what I meant to agree to. This is fraud. Ruth stood perfectly calm. Your Honor, the documents were disclosed well within the discovery window. Mrs. Davis had full legal representation. She initialed every page. She confirmed the settlement verbally in this court 5 minutes ago. She was even thanked by the respondent for being reasonable. I looked up at Linda then, and for the first time in years, she looked small. Not poised, not cunning, not triumphant. Small. A woman in a too-white dress realizing she danced into a trap she helped design. You tricked me, she hissed. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The judge exhaled through his nose. Mrs. Davis, this settlement is final. You signed. You agreed. You disclosed nothing that would nullify this agreement. Unless you have proof of coercion or forgery, which I strongly doubt, you're bound. Linda sat down hard. The air sucked from her like someone had punched her in the gut. Emily looked at her, wide-eyed, then glanced at me. Her lips parted, maybe to speak, but she said nothing. The judge stood. Court is dismissed. He left, and in the silence that followed, only one sound remained. The soft, rasping breath of a woman realizing she had just sold herself the rope. Ruth didn't gloat. That's what made it hurt more. She slid the folder across the polished courtroom table with the same motion you'd use to pass a menu. Neat, smooth, lethal. This, she said, is the respondent's full financial declaration, filed months ago, in compliance with court rules and shared with petitioner's counsel during preliminary discovery. Linda stared at the folder like it had teeth. Langford reached for it, eyes darting down the page, and I watched his expression collapse in stages. First surprise, then alarm, then that twitch of panic lawyers get when they realize they've let their client sign off on their own execution. These are trusts, he mumbled. Irrevocable. Filed before the petition date. Activation clause on spousal abandonment? Correct, Ruth said, cool as an ice bath. Triggered automatically upon the petitioner's filing of divorce. Langford looked up. That's not enforceable. You can't just move assets around mid-proceeding. You're right, Ruth said, which is why everything was moved prior to the proceeding. We followed every rule. The trigger clause simply locked them down after she filed. Not a single asset changed hands after that point. She opened another folder and slid it to the judge. Your Honor, tab 4 contains dated signatures, financial ledgers, trustee contacts, and third-party notarization. All verified. All legal. The judge turned to Linda. Mrs. Davis, do you contest this? She stood, rigid, pale. This wasn't explained to me, she snapped. I thought I was getting half. I thought we agreed. The judge tilted his head. He disclosed the trusts. Your signature confirms acknowledgement. Did you read the disclosure documents? Richard told me it was just standard stuff. I sent everything, Langford said, raising both hands. You signed off. Emailed. Twice. Linda turned to me, and this time there was no smirk. No smug calm. Just open, raw fury. You cheated me. I looked at her for the first time in minutes. Held her gaze. No, I said. You traded. And you didn't read the price tag. Her voice rose. You planned this. This was premeditated. Like love with your cousin? Ruth said under her breath, loud enough for the judge to hear. He didn't laugh. But he didn't object either. Linda slammed her hand on the table. I deserve half. I gave him my life. I raised his daughter. Our daughter, I corrected. She spun to the judge. You can't let this stand. This is malicious. He adjusted his glasses and leaned back. Mrs. Davis, you filed for divorce. He disclosed his finances. You accepted the settlement you signed, and you confirmed those signatures in court. You weren't coerced. You weren't deceived. You simply didn't read. That is not grounds for reversal. You smug bastard. She hissed at me. You set me up. I stood and gathered the folders. Ruth followed my lead, already tucking her tablet into her bag. I wrote it all down years ago, I said quietly. I just waited for you to hand me the pen. The judge rose. Court is adjourned. Linda didn't move, just stood there frozen, staring at the pieces of a kingdom she thought she'd inherited. And now she was walking out with a Lexus that needed brakes and a bank account smaller than her ego. And for once in her life, there was no one left to blame but the mirror. The coffee was bitter, strong, just the way I liked it. The porch creaked under my chair as I leaned back and watched the early light creep across the yard. I'd mowed it 2 days ago, edges clean, no weeds. It looked better than the main house ever did. Smaller, quieter. Mine. No photos on the walls. No ghost of a wedding dress hung behind a closet door. Just clean wood, muted colors, and peace. Then the phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Linda. I stared for a second, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won out. I swiped. You ruined me. You turned Emily against me. Rot in hell. That was it. No punctuation beyond rage. I scrolled back. There were no earlier messages. She hadn't reached out since court. No appeals, no voicemails. Just silence. Then this. I tapped over to Emily's page. It had taken me weeks to build up the nerve to look. And it was blank. Blocked. No photos. No captions. No birthday notifications. Just the empty gray circle and that tiny, final word. Add friend. I nodded slowly. Took another sip. Let the bitterness settle under my tongue. So that's how it ended. Not with screaming. Not with cops or courtroom dramatics. Just silence. Quiet deletions. Digital amputations. Linda had burned every bridge thinking she was headed toward a better kingdom. But kingdoms take work. Michael didn't know how to build one. He could crack open a beer and toss a steak on a grill, sure. But manage her moods? Her expectations? Her history? She'd learn. Eventually. And Emily? I stopped blaming her. She made a choice. Maybe not a fair one. Maybe not an informed one. But a choice all the same. Someday 5, 10 years from now, she might come knocking, teary-eyed, asking for forgiveness in exchange for memories. Or maybe not. Either way, I'd be ready. Because this story wasn't about loss. Not really. It was about removal. About cutting out the rot before it spread any deeper. I hadn't just survived Linda's betrayal. I'd outmaneuvered it. Silently. Precisely. I'd given her everything she asked for. And she signed for it, grinning. Now she was just a number in a court file. A cautionary tale in a Facebook group she'd eventually leave in shame. I deleted the message. Let the horizon stretch wide. Justice doesn't always come with thunder or applause. Sometimes, it arrives in a quiet morning, on a porch that no one else knows exists, with a warm mug and no more damn questions.